everybody, this is Anne and welcome back to Painting Big. So today we are starting a new series called Fundamentals of Color Mixing. I've had over the years so many requests for help with mixing colors, and so I thought that we would do this series and every video will be on a different kind of spectral color. So we'll do it on red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple, and then we'll talk about probably brown, and maybe we'll do some skin tone stuff. I'm not sure, we'll see how it goes, but for the spectral colors, for the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, I want to take each color and I want to talk about why it's easier to mix with a pure form of that color, but I'm also going to show you how to figure out what's in a red or orange or whatever, what's in one of those colors if you know something has been mixed in but you're not sure what. And then we're going to actually mix to either side of the color wheel. So for red, we'll mix an orange and a purple, and I'll talk about like the differences between different reds and how this factors in. And then we'll also mix a shadow and we're going to mix a highlight for that color. All right, that's a lot, so let's get to it. Alrighty, we're doing this on the wet palette, folks. I guess we got a dry spot in my wet palette. I guess I'm going to be using this. There we go. Part of what makes color mixing so hard when you're using miniatures paints is that it's not just your red, right? It's not just your clear, your elemental, your single pigment red. It's all of these other crazy reds. How the heck, you know? So let's talk a little bit about kind of what factors in here. Now, obviously, when you're dealing with a red that's darker, you've got other pigments added in other than red. And that is going to make a big difference if you try to, say, mix an orange with one of these. But you still can. And key to that is kind of learning how to tell. If you can't tell at a glance, if you don't know enough about color to tell at a glance, but learning to tell what is in that color, that's going to factor into that mix. So I've picked a few colors out here. One of them is actually not even a Reaper color. It's a Two Thin Coats color. I thought I would use one of Duncan's colors here, and also use two of Reaper's colors. Now I, of course, having been the one who created Master Series Paint in the beginning, I know what other pigments are in here. But I'm hoping to give you a way to tell so that you'll be able to factor that into your mixing. Now, I do want to say that when it comes to a red that's just a little bit off, so like this is our single pigment red, and this is a red that's a little bit different. It's a little lighter, it's got a little bit of a shift to it. Brilliant red is what this is. When you're dealing with a red that's very close to the pure red, that's only a little bit off, you can use that as a primary red. You don't really have to worry, not unless you're trying to get a really like intense orange out of it. Like if you're trying to mix an orange and you're like, oh, I need it to be bright, then you don't use that off red. You just use the clear red or the elemental red, you know, the only single pigment red, the really bright, intense, screaming at you, vivid red. But for everything else, if you're just like mixing colors just to mix, like if you're just like on a limited budget and you need a red, if you happen to have brilliant red, you can use that as a primary. It's close enough. The amount of other pigment that is in here is so small that it's really not going to have a huge impact on your mixes. That changes when you go up to the next level here, right? So there's our you can see the difference here. This is heraldic red and this is blood red. And so you can see that there are differences in here. And these are going to have a bigger impact. So they're essentially going to mute your colors more when you mix them with other things because there's other stuff in here. But if you can figure out what's in these and say that you find that blood red is just a little bit purpley when you mix a little bit of white into it, then you'll be like, oh, all right, so if I want to mix kind of a bruisey purple, this is actually a good color to use. Whereas, again, if you mix another thing and it turns, you know, that it looks a little orange, you're like, oh, well, maybe this would be a good red to mix some orange colors with. So you can use these slightly off reds, and that's fine. When it comes to these, as mentioned, you're going to want to be more selective. Obviously, none of these are a primary red, but if you're working on a limited color scheme, they can serve. They're very limited, obviously. You can never make them more saturated, right? You can never make them higher chroma. They're always going to be a muted red. But they're not useless either. So it really depends on what you're trying to make. Well, first, let's actually use these heraldic and blood reds. Let's put down a drop of each, and I'll show you how I tell what's in a color. Let's put down a little bit of that. I'll get close, don't worry. That's heraldic. This is blood. It's a tasty color. And actually, just for fun and comparison's sake, I'm going to put down a drop of the most intense red pigment so you can see there really is quite a large difference. Let's get closer. Okay, and just for fun, let's actually get Infernal Red in here, and let's get that Duncan's Red. So as you can see, Infernal, not as dark on the palette as it looks in the bottle. That can happen sometimes. This is Sanguine Scarlet from Too Thin Coats. Let's get that down too. So we've got a lot of different reds here, and honestly, I could use any of these as a primary if I had to. Like, obviously these guys, that guy is going to give you more of a muted, like if I try to mix an orange with that, it's definitely going to be a burnt orange. It's not going to be the super brightest orange, but we'll show you guys that when we get to a little bit further along in the video. So how you determine this, sometimes you can just line them up. It's like sometimes you can look at that bright red and you can look at this color, blood red, and you can see that it looks a little bluer or purpley, and that's valid. Like, probably there are some purple or blue pigments in there. If we want to really know, what I like to do, and I do this with dark colors for the same reason, if I need to know what's in a color, I'm going to put one over by our bright red too, just for comparison. I mix it with white. And let's mix them. So if we mix our clear, like our straight up red, it's going to make a pretty straightforward pink, pretty intense. You can see that. Pretty elementary. So now when we mix white with these other guys, let's take a look and see what it tells us. So this one is heraldic. That one's really close, actually. Even though there are other pigments in here, you can see it's pretty intense. It's not far off. So you see what I mean when I told you you could use this as primary red, even though it doesn't seem like it. I can see there's a little bit of something in there that's dulling it a little bit. You can see it's a little bit darker. My camera really loves reds, so it's making it look brighter than it is. But you can see there's a little bit more dull. Maybe even a little bit colder. And I'll tell you, but it's not a straight purple. Let's keep going, then I'll reveal to you, because I know what pigments are in those colors. Now this one should be pretty evident. It already looked blue and purple. When we throw some in there, it's going to go definitely more toward the purple side. Can you see how that shifts? So that tells you right away you've got some blue probably in this color. And that means, guys, that if it's already got blue in it, it's probably a better candidate for mixing purples than for mixing oranges, right? Because if it's already got that blue in there, if you try to make an orange with this, it's going to be really kind of a muted, muddy orange. It's not going to be a very good orange. Unless you're looking for a muted, muddy orange, then you're good. So let's look at this one. And this is Reaper's Infernal Red. It's a brand new color. This one's definitely warmer, a little oranger, see? Can you see that? Look at that, and then you can see it's darker and oranger. More orange, whatever the proper way to say that is. It is, in fact, a little bit brownish. So when you see a color that's both darker and a little warmer when you compare it to these others, what that tells you is probably there's a little bit of brown or yellow in that. Brown, orange, or yellow. I say maybe all of the above. Remember that brown is usually just orange and black mixed together, all things considered. So that's probably got some orange or yellow in it. The other thing to look at, though, is see how it's a little bit duller. It's hard to see, but it's not as like fiery and intense as these other colors. And what that's probably telling you, because you see that's a very bright, and that's just a little more dull. What that's probably telling us is that this has black in it. So when you see a color dull out at all, when it really kind of loses a little bit of its life when you add that white, that is a sign that you are looking at black. And that makes a big impact on mixing. Black is the one pigment that tends to steal life from colors. Like, it's a vampiric color in more ways than one. But yeah, so it will dull color. So just knowing that there's black in there, or probably black, even though this one is it's very close to this one, I would use blood red as a primary before I used this one, because black mixed with a lot of other colors has kind of interactions. Like I said, it makes things kind of dull. So let's look at Duncan's color here, the Sanguine Scarlet, which is very pretty. It is, however, this is interesting. So it's very similar in color to our blood red. However, it is losing intensity. Just like this one, it's got a little bit of dullness to it. And what that tells me is that they're using black in here to take this down. It looks cooler, like it looks like toward purple, and that could either be that there's also some blue in the Sanguine Scarlet. That could very well be, given the color. It's just not intense enough. As a comparison, you see how bright that is? That was the blood red, remember? I can tell you that blood red has 0 black pigment in it. It only has blue and magenta and red. So that's why this looks, see how it looks more dull than this? See how this looks brighter? Heck, even this looks a little bit brighter, but part of that is that it's warmer. But you can see that dullness next to this, and that is a sign that there is likely to be black pigment. And that means that it's not a great mixing color, because it's going to steal the life out of the colors. So if you are going for a muted color scheme where you've got a lot of grayed out soft colors, then these would be good choices. If you're not, though, if you have a more saturated color scheme where you've got a lot of more intense colors, then you want to stick up here in the blood red, heraldic red, and the clear red, just using a straight up really bright red and just mixing a little bit of something else with it. Now, what's this one, you ask? I didn't talk about heraldic. Heraldic is a very interesting color because it is made, obviously it's a little darker, right? But it's created by actually mixing green pigment into the red. So we're adding a complementary color, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later in this video. So for that reason, we don't really see this go warmer or colder. It's not as orange as that. It's not as blue as that, because it's got the green pigment in it, and that is just essentially neutralizing the red a little bit and darkening it. All right, so let's talk about mixing our neighbors then. So one thing you should know is that if you're looking to create a purple, a good purple, as in a very vibrant purple, you actually don't use any of these reds. What you actually use is magenta. Yes, this is a red, and we'll demo that while we create our oranges. So when we set out to mix oranges, you always want to choose a yellow that is orangier. So this is common sense. So it doesn't matter what else is in it. Both of these colors are not pure pigments, although Lantern is close, and Sun is definitely not. And so again, if you want a very bright color, then you want to choose a color that looks like it doesn't have a lot of white or other stuff in it. You want to choose something that is more toward orange instead of toward a green. Yellow goes 2 ways, guys. It goes warm toward the orange and cold toward the green. And this one, obviously, the sun yellow is not as near as orange as the lantern yellow. So let's do a couple of quick mixes. We'll put down our lantern here, and we'll put down our sun here. I also have elemental yellow, which is a very green yellow around here somewhere, but I wanted to experiment more with these since they're closer to what you might actually grab. All right, so right away, let's just grab a little bit of our elemental red. And you're gonna have to add a lot of yellow to it because red is really high diffusion and it takes over. Let's see, so let's keep moving. You can see how much, like I have to essentially rinse out my brush to get all the red off of it. And then grab a bunch of this, and then I can make a lighter orange. There we are. So that kind of shows you a rule about red and yellow. Red overwhelms the yellow very easy. So to get what we would consider a more medium orange, you're going to need to take just a tiny bit of red and a lot of yellow. Otherwise, you're going to get a very red orange like that. Let's actually grab that and mix it to this one, sun yellow. I'm going to grab just a little bit of red there. I've learned my lesson, right? Tiny bit of red, a lot of yellow. Now here we can see, oh, not enough red. Hoo-hoo. Ah, too much red. Ah, yeah, it goes like that. It's easy to overcompensate, guys. It's so easy. Anyway, right off the bat, you can see that this is actually a little bit different. Now, what this is telling us, because it's getting this kind of dreamsicle orange kind of look, right? What that's telling us is that we've got white in this yellow. So there's a fair amount of white in sun yellow. It helps with coverage. For all that, it's not a terrible orange for highlights. It's just not going to give you a really vibrant highlight, but it's not a terrible orange. However, when you start working with these colors that have blue in them, you're going to see a little bit of a difference. So let's grab our blood red, which has a bit of blue in it. Let's grab this. And what we're going to see is that this is just a little bit muddier of an orange. So it's not that different though. Like if I really look at it, and maybe we'll get a little closer here, see if we can really show you guys what I'm talking about. Do you see that's just a little bit browner over here? And this is a lot more fiery. It's just a little bit though. They're just a little bit off. And this is why I told you that with these near colors, like even the brilliant red, but even, as it turns out, the blood red, they are going to give you a bit of a browner. You can see this is a little bit browner than that. See how intense that is? You see this one's just a little bit browner, a little bit darker. But they're very close. They're much closer than you'd think, considering that the colors we're comparing look like this. So can you see now how you could even use any of these as a primary? Like you can still make a decent orange, even with a red with blue in it. And now let's try one of our brownish ones. So I'm going to try this guy, which is the Infernal Red. I know this color has black in it, by the way. It has black and yellow in it with its red. So let's grab this. Now we're getting more into the autumnal colors. So again, this is going to be a lot fierier. This is definitely starting to look a little bit more like that one, isn't it? This is one we can even see there's a little bit of a difference in these. But what it comes down to, guys, and that is a really dark color, guys. So now, looking at that, now we've used all of these to mix an orange. And we haven't gotten anything like yes, there's a lot of difference between this guy up here and that guy down there, but not as much as you'd think. Like, okay, there you go. You can see how intense that is compared to how this is browner. But it's not a ton, right? So what I'm saying here, guys, is that except for the yellow that has a lot of white, and this would also apply to any red that had a lot of white in it, as far as the other ones here go, it's all like pretty decent oranges. So yeah, what you should take away from this is don't overthink it. Any red you grab, any of them, even this really dark bloodstain red, all of these are super hyper loaded with red pigment. The red pigment is by far the predominant pigment in these paints. And the other pigments, depending on the value of the color, obviously a darker red is going to have a lot more of other pigments in it, but it might not be as much as you think. And when you do a mixing test, that's going to tell you. And when you do a mixing test, you can see it. All right, let us do purple. So if you try to grab, let me see, what's a good, should I just do sapphire? Yeah, so I'll show you. I'm not even going to reach for my elemental blue. I'm going to reach just for sapphire. Sapphire is not a pure blue, but I can still use it to illustrate my point. And this is what I mean. You could use these. I could grab blood red, sapphire blue. I probably wouldn't grab the sun yellow. Like I said, a lot of white in a paint limits your options because it washes out all your colors. So if you're looking for more of a pastel color scheme, you could do that. But otherwise, I would choose a more intense yellow. But yeah, I mean, I could use these guys as a primary red and a primary blue, and I'd get pretty decent results with it. Alrighty, so blue. If we try to use our regular red with blue, and anybody who's tried to create their own color wheel knows this, we don't get a very good purple, do we? We get a very bruisey purple, just like that. It's a pretty purple, and if we grab a little white, we can see that it comes up to a really nice bruised color. Look at that. So that's a pretty color, but it might not be what you want with your purple. And part of that is coming from the fact that sapphire has a little bit of white in it, a little bit of black in it. But even if I grabbed my purest of blues, I'm still not going to get the purple that we all like think of, that bright, you know, fantastic, vibrant purple out of this. That's because we're using the wrong red. We mentioned clear magenta before. Let's try this again. Clear magenta, blue, and now look at us. So the secret to mixing a great purple is magenta. And it's just the difference in red. And just like I was talking, remember I was talking about kind of colder and warmer yellows and choosing the right one? Well, with reds, it makes the biggest difference. Blues doesn't matter so much. Yellows, you can make it work. But when it comes to red and mixing purples, it matters. So instead of choosing the naphthol red or the pure roll red, the bright elemental red, choose the magenta if you are looking to create a really intense purple. And just to prove to you that magenta really is a red, I love doing this. Let's grab more of our lantern yellow. And so, magenta, are you really a red? Why, yes, Anne, I am a red, and I can make a pretty darn nice orange. Pretty intense, huh? Not bad. So there's your proof that magenta is in fact a red. It is the coldest of the reds, quinacridone magenta. And most magentas, if a line has a magenta and it is labeled as such, it is usually a pure pigment magenta. It's going to be elemental magenta for Reaper's new line of MSP. Right now it's clear magenta, but yeah. Now let's talk real quick about mixing a shadow. If you are using a red, let's just pick a random red. Let's pick our blood red. Blood red is a very popular Reaper color. All right, so say you've got this red and you want to mix a shadow for it. One thing we've already talked about that is a very simple fix for it is you could add a little bit of green. So let's actually add a little bit of brilliant green to this. Remember how heraldic red is actually made by adding green to red. So let's get a little bit of that down there. You could just take a little bit of a green. I would choose a medium. This one's close to crayon green, right? Brilliant green is really kind of what we think of as green crayon green. This one, or a little bit darker even. If you're building a shadow, then you absolutely can use a darker green, even if there is black in it. Building a shadow, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And if we mix these two together, just on my brush, we can see that it actually makes quite a pretty purpley red. It is a muted color. It's not a really vibrant dark red. You don't necessarily need it to be, though. There is a style of painting that puts really saturated colors in shadows, and a lot of people really like that. If you're looking for a more natural shadow, though, like traditional artists have historically done it in the olden days, then going with a desaturated shadow is a good bet. Shadows tend to be cooler to our eyes and darker, and this definitely fits the bill. The other thing I like to do, which is totally a cheat, is to just use a black brown. So almost every paint line has a really dark brown in it. Ours, I guess you could use blackened brown or walnut, but I prefer brown liner. I found it's a little more neutral. So there's my black brown. It's brown liner. You can see it there. I find that brown liner will make a naturalistic shadow for almost any other color. So I'll grab a bit of that. Let's try that again. So this will create a nice dark red, very similar to the other one. So both of these work just fine. Black is not a liability when you're mixing shadows. It's a liability when you're at your midtone, because if you're going to be mixing highlights with that color, you don't want to throw black in it and have it really kill the vibrancy of your color. But since shadows are meant to be a bit more muted and usually cooler, black is all right in that case. That's usually what it does for colors. And we'll talk about black probably, black and white in their own sort of videos. So that's two different ways that you have to mix a pretty nice color. There are other ways to mix shadows also, but I'm gonna try to keep this pretty basic, and I'm gonna move on pretty quick here to doing highlighting. So let's keep our red here. With reds, you've got to ask yourself, am I going to take it up toward orange, or am I going to take it cooler toward white. You can also make a line right down the middle, which is more like natural. So if we go outside and we look at a red object in sunlight, which has a bit of yellow and a bit of white in it, right? That's going to come up with a slightly warmer but still not bright orange highlight. You can go orange, obviously, then you would add yellow and white. So there's our yellow. It's a little bit of white. So if I wanted to just mix, I could come up with a highlight color for that. And if I decided that I didn't like it so pinkish, then I can add a little bit more yellow into it, make it a little bit more orange. That's going to be a pretty good highlight for that color. You can also use a color like sun yellow, which we recommend, which we talked about. It already has a lot of white in it. So we could also use that. Let's actually get another one. We could also go with my brand new highlighting yellow, which is called Zenith Yellow. And this, as you can see, is a yellow off white. And the reason we're reaching for yellow is because highlights do tend to be warmer than shadows or midtones. And that's because we think of sunlight, right? It has a little bit of yellow cast in it. Certain times of day it gets very yellow. It's not always the case. On cloudy days, for example, highlights tend to go grayish, so that's definitely not warmer. But that said, our eyes are used to seeing highlights as warmer, so that's why we tend to go this way. We tend to add, even if we're using white, we tend to add just a touch of a yellow in there to brighten it up. So I could also go with this yellow and create a highlight with this. This is the sun yellow. It already has white in it, so I don't have to add more. I get pretty close to that. We still got more intensity in that one. We added more yellow, not as much white. And then we can do the mix down here with the Zenith Yellow or any like ice yellow from Vallejo. Any yellow really that has a lot of white in it. There's people who use ivory color for this. They'll just always highlight by mixing in an ivory. Doesn't matter. So this is going to take us a lot more toward a pink, but it does have enough yellow in it to make it a little warmer. So these are going to give you very different highlight colors, right? So you just have to decide kind of what direction, but they're all valid. So anytime you mix like a little bit of white and just a tiny bit of yellow or even more yellow in, you can create a decent highlight for a red. And you can also go like kind of halfway between and to make it kind of a coral color if you want. That can be a very good one too. So the moral of the story here in the end of this video, I know this one took a long time, but this is like the flagship, right? This is like the one I'm starting on. So as we go on, we won't have quite as much to say. Red and the other primaries, though, we tend to have a lot to say about them. All right, you guys. So hopefully this gave you a lot of information. Feel free to rewatch. I'm sorry I went long again. But there's a lot here. There's a lot to unpack. But I really did want to put something out here just on the basics of color mixing. This is just the tip of the iceberg. You can go crazy from here. But if you carry one thing away from this video, please let it be that you should just play. Get out, if you've got a wet palette, get it out, put down a piece of paper, grab a bunch of different reds, grab a couple of yellows or blues or whatever, and just play. Mix, see what you can do. If you keep it simple, like you're adding white or you're adding this or you're adding that, as long as you're mixing two colors together, you're always going to be able to reproduce it, and you should keep kind of a little, I don't know, I keep little artist trading cards, so if I make a color that I really love when I'm mixing, I could just do a swatch of it and write down how I made it. Artist trading cards are just little like magic card sized watercolor papers that I use a lot for that kind of thing. But yeah, just sit down, just play. Make mixing not scary by enjoying yourself with it, essentially. I hope this was fun. I hope you learned something, and I'll be back again. We'll talk about oranges next month. And oranges are interesting because oranges also make browns and skin tones. So we're going to have some fun, okay? We're going to have some fun with orange. Thank you so much, everybody. This is Anne signing off.